Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 572. I was playing Devon of Devon Chess. This is the third game in our series. It was a dual commentary game, so you can check out his commentary on his channel as well. Let's see, he started out with d4. Now in this series, the previous two games, we each had one win, although my win came in the previous game from a position where actually Devon was completely winning, but he did overlook a back rank mate, so I managed to score a point. Anyway, he's out for revenge here with d4. I play knight f6, hoping to get into maybe a Nimzo Indian or something like that, and he goes knight f3, so that kind of squashes the Nimzo plan. Knight f3 is an interesting move. It's second choice in popularity to c4, which is kind of the main line. And it allows a lot of different continuations. I just play d5 here, putting a pawn in the center since he's avoided all the sort of theoretical openings. And now White has a lot of choices. White could actually go back to the Queen's Gambit declined idea with c4, or can move the bishop out to a couple of squares. That would be the Tory attack or the London system. Or just play like he did in this game with e3. And e3 introduces either the call system or maybe just a queen's pawn opening, no particular, with no particular name. But we'll see what happens. In this game, we get into the Colle-Zukertort. Now, this particular move order allows me to play c5 immediately, and I think that's what I should do. But knight bd7 isn't too terrible. I do want to say that Devon played this game really well, and so I had some trouble even figuring out where my mistakes were. But with the help of the chess engine, I think I identified a few turning points. So it's interesting, though, that my mistakes are kind of they were small mistakes. There were no huge blunders. And Devon did a great job of taking advantage of them. And on his part, he didn't make any mistakes, so I never really had a chance to get back in the game. So nice, well-played game from Devon. Anyway, he develops with bishop d3 here. I go with g6, going for a fianchetto setup. Here we're out of the opening book. He castled. And I go bishop g7. All these moves are pretty normal. Now he goes b3. So this is a choice here. c3 would be the call system. And then White would typically leave the bishop there and play for e4. That's an interesting way to play. And then the Colle-Zukertort, which is what this game is b3 and bishop to b2. So developing the bishop on this diagonal. So we went with b3 here. I castled. So these bishops are looking at each other, and they probably will neutralize each other along this diagonal in the long run, particularly if the diagonal opens up, although that's not what happens in this game. He goes bishop b2. I go c5. Goes knight bd2, and I decide to take. I don't have to take here. I could continue with the b6 and just kind of hold the tension in the center. And based on what happened in this game, maybe that would be a better choice. But c takes d4 is not yet a mistake, so this is still playable. And I was kind of curious to see how he'd take back. You know, if he takes back with a piece, like knight takes is an option here. I guess I can kick it with the pawn move, so maybe it's not so great. But I was kind of curious if he wanted to try and keep that open and open up a diagonal for his bishop. But he just took with the pawn. And this allows White to build up a big center. So his plan is to play c4 here. And I try to slow that down with this move knight b6. But already my pieces are stumbling over each other a little bit. This knight on d7 is not particularly well placed. Well, let's go on a few moves. The chess engine comes up with an interesting way to unravel. But knight b6 is not yet a bad move. It opens up a line for the bishop as well as getting this knight out of the way of the queen. But it is a bit in the way on the b6 square. We'll see that later. Anyway, Devon plays h3, which takes away another square from my light-squared bishop and leaves me in a bit of a pickle as far as how I can continue my development. And eventually I settle on the move bishop d7. But that actually, I think, is the first real mistake of the game. The first mistake that I make here, and starts me on a kind of a downhill path. So let's look at the alternatives right here. There's a couple of really interesting plans. Let's start with this knight h5 idea the chess engine has. What's interesting about this? First of all, it violates that famous opening rule about not moving a piece twice before developing all your pieces. And that's one of those opening rules that maybe should just be thrown away because I think it's more often a rule that's violated more often than it's respected. And knight h5 is a good move here. It's the knight is looking at this f4 square. I didn't really think of this idea at all during the game, so that's why I'm kind of focusing on this a little bit. But the bishop, in this Colle-Zukertort system, the bishop has left this diagonal and has gone to the other diagonal. So there's no piece that naturally defends the f4 square. And this pawn to g3 move to keep the knight out is not possible because of bishop takes h3. So there's no way to stop that knight from coming to f4. And so after a couple of moves, say rook e1, it's pretty natural, knight to f4, hitting the bishop, and white doesn't want to give up the bishop pair, so the bishop goes back to f1, which is not horrible. I mean, it's defending key squares on the king side, but it's probably not what white had in mind. And now this bishop comes out to f5. Now that's it solved the development problem of this bishop and got the bishop on a better square than just the kind of mindless development I did, where I just got the bishop out of the way to the only square I could see that made sense. Interesting way, and it shows how thinking during the opening can be helpful, and also taking all those rules with a grain of salt. Knowing when to disobey the rules is key here. So let's go back. In this position, the other interesting idea here is just bishop f5 immediately, which I did think about briefly, because that is an idea I was familiar with. It's kind of a risky idea. If white takes, then black takes back with the pawn, and his king side is opened up a little bit, but he has good light squared control with these pawns on light squares, and with the light squared bishops traded, there's no piece that white has to counteract the light squared control. And this bishop at the moment is looking at a pretty solid pawn here on d4, so it doesn't have a lot of scope. And so it's just interesting. These strengths that I have on the light squares, compensated by the weak king side, give me a playable game, apparently. It's not like it's better for black. I mean, white still has that opening advantage, but it's an interesting way to play. So definitely one of those options I should have played instead of bishop d7. This gets the bishop out of the way and allows my rook to come to the c-file. So there was some thought that went into it, but not enough. So he goes with c4 here, and I decided to take. Once again, the engine is suggesting that bishop f5 is a good move. So even a tempo down, it's still better to put the bishop on f5 than to leave it where it is. But I went ahead and traded. So the combination of bishop d7 and this trade is probably what gives white the advantage that he keeps the rest of the game. Now, normally these pawns are not too threatening. There's a well-known plan that black has to, first of all, restrain those pawns with pawn to e6, pawn to b6, and then you put the rooks on the d-file and the c-file and put pressure on those pawns. And it gives, usually it gives black enough play so that it's an okay position. There's always, I mean, it's an interesting position for white to play too, because these pawns control a lot of squares, and they also always have dynamic possibilities coming forward. But in general, it's not usually as lopsided as it was in this game. But in this game, the problem is this knight is on b6. My pieces are just not really well placed to undertake operations against the hanging pawns. But I start with rook c8. That's the right idea. He goes rook c1, and I go e6. So those two moves were fine. I'm just trying to restrain these pawns. But now I have to do something about the knight that's blocking the b pawn. And also have to get the queen and the bishop out of the way so the rook can come to the d-file to get that correct setup, or the typical setup against those hanging pawns. And he really doesn't give me enough time for that. He hops right in with the knight. So good active square for the knight. I wasn't sure, in fact, that he really wanted to trade it for this bishop. So I was just allowing that trade. I tried to put the bishop on a more active square, and this also frees up a square for the knight to retreat to. And I was a little bit surprised when he took, but this is okay. It does win an advantage to white, which is the bishop pair. And let's see. In this position, I should have taken back with the pawn. That would fit the strategy of trying to restrain these hanging pawns better than what I played. When I took back with the rook, this is maybe like the second mistake. After that bishop d7 and the exchange on c4, this is the second mistake. And this rook here is just a bit of a target. Gains some tempos for white. And let's see, he pushes on with a4, immediately trying to chase this knight away, which I wanted to move that knight away anyway, so I just started it on its journey ahead of time. This knight h5 idea, by the way, is still in the position, so it's interesting. The chess engine is pointing that out. He goes knight f3, bringing his knight into the game, and I go b6. So I finally have managed to get this restraining position against the isolated pawns, but the rest of my pieces are not correctly set up. And he's had, with those extra tempos that I've given him, moving my pieces around and reorganizing them, he's managed to get some counterplay going already with the a-pawn, preparing to undermine my queenside pawns here. So all in all, it's just I'm just a little too slow, a little too late. Okay, so he hops in with knight e5, hitting my rook. I drop back to rook c7. It is interesting here that rook d6 is a playable move. You wouldn't think so at first glance, because rook d6 is immediately subject to this skewer, which I expect white would go for right away, seeing those rooks lined up like that. But the idea here is to actually give up the exchange at this point and play on, but get a pawn for the exchange and play on in this position. And after bishop takes, there is this knight fork threat, so I have to take back with the queen. And then I can still come into c6, and I have to move the rook again. But, his remaining pawns are a little bit weak. And I have one pawn for the exchange already. So this isn't such a terrible position. It's something that I could play on. And it's kind of an example of the way you need to play when you're in trouble. You sometimes have to give some material back to liberate your position. If we compare this position, where my pieces are all kind of cramped and don't have much space, to the position at the end of that line, I've got my pieces a little bit activated, and it's worth something. It's probably better than the way I played. Oh, also, going and taking the exchange isn't even the best move for white at this point. I just played bishop a3 because that seems like the most natural move here to me. But just sitting on this advantage with a move like queen to e2 or queen to c2 looks like that's the best way to play it. Anyway, I went rook c7, getting out from the threat of the knight, and he goes bishop to c3, preparing to push on with a5 here. Knight e7, trying to get my pieces into the game, and he pushes on with a5 right here. So I notice at this point, if I take that pawn, he can take back with the bishop, and there's this skewer along this diagonal. So so I didn't want to take the pawn, and I was looking for other ideas here. I can just leave it where it is and play something like knight d7 to challenge his knight. That's the chess engine recommendation, probably the best way to continue here. And then he can take this pawn and leave me with an isolated b pawn, which is restrained by his good pawns here and comes under attack. So that's kind of an ugly position to play. I'd certainly be under pressure the whole rest of the game with a position like that. But it's the best of the alternatives that are available to me. Sometimes it's just a matter of making the best with what you've got. I tried something different. I played this move, with the idea I'll keep the pawn here so his bishop can't come and skewer me, and I'll try and undermine the c-pawn so that I can open up the d5 square for one of my knights, try and get some piece activity. And I was aware this was a pawn sack, so he can grab the pawn here, and then I would play knight d5. That was my plan. Let's take a look at that. If he takes, knight d5 is not even the top choice here. The engine wants to play bishop at h6, activating the bishop on this diagonal. Let's see, is there a problem with knight d5? Bishop to d2, and an exchange. I thought this would free up my position a little bit, but the chess engine likes this. The queen and bishop actually are forming a nice battery here. He can get rid of my bishop, and he is he is up the let's see, in this line. No, he's not up the exchange in this line. He's up a pawn, though. I guess the problem is the pawn is pretty dangerous. He's going to get a passed pawn over here on the queen side, and that's a winning endgame for white. So anyway, my plan with the b5 wasn't working in any case. But he played this move a6, and now I overlooked a tactic. At this point, I think I was starting to run low on time, but I didn't notice that he could just put his bishop there and skewer my pieces. So I took here, hitting his bishop, and I thought he had to react, but this is a nice intermediate move. I'm attacking his bishop, but he's attacking my rook, and if I take his bishop, that opens up the line for his rook, so he can take my whole rook. So I'm just down the exchange here. I mean, at first you might think I get this bishop and this bishop for my rook, and it's good, but I don't get the second bishop. It's defended by the rook. So that doesn't work. Let's see. The best I can do here, well, actually, that is one of the better moves, taking. So I might as well put this on. He takes. At least at the end of this, I get the pawn on d4. And so that's better than what I played. I get at least one pawn for the exchange. The chess engine has a kind of a clever idea here, which I didn't think of at all, just to push the pawn on to c3 and hold on to this pawn that way. And if he grabs the exchange here, then and rook b1 to come down here, I can play one of the knights to d5, hold on to my pawn. So I'm down, let's see, in this case I'm down the exchange for a pawn, and he's got an active rook coming to b7, but I have counterplay. So this is a position where I could continue to play on. Let's see. After c3, what was it? There was a suggestion he could play rook takes c3. Yeah, taking advantage of the pin. And how would this go? This would be, okay, this would be a bishop and a rook for the queen. This would be another way to give up just a little bit of material and continue to fight on. So the way I played it, I played queen c8 to unpin the rook and defend the pawn. But after he takes off the rook, so he's up the exchange and he also gets the pawn. So I don't get a pawn for the exchange. I'm just down the pure exchange at this point. And so so that was the last mistake at this point. I'm just completely losing. Up until this point, I guess I still had drawing hopes. It was still complicated enough that things could go wrong for white. But here it's pretty straightforward. Let's see. I get my queen away from his rook. I'm also starting to run low on time here, so the remaining moves, both of us are, I think, the remaining moves might not be that accurate, but notice how white keeps winning advantage all the rest of the game. Let's see, I played my knight to d5. That was the idea, getting my cancel out. I brought the other knight to d5, getting a good square for the knight. Goes bishop to b5. I go rook to d8, lining up on his d-pawn here, trying to win that. Goes rook to c6. So I guess that was the idea of this bishop b5 move, supporting a rook coming in to harass, or entering my position in general, but also to harass my queen. Although he could have played that earlier, right, because the knight was also already defending c6. Anyway, I guess my best move is just to retreat my queen back. That's looks pretty hopeless to me. I tried to do something active with the queen. He chases me with rook b1, and now there's not many good squares. I can retreat or come over here to a5, but I don't know what it's doing over there. Oh, well, it's still looking at his back rank, so there's still potentially tricks here, but the position is a little too closed for me to get anything going. Let's see, he went bishop c4, hitting my knight, and opening up this b file for his rook. That's probably the more important issue. Let's see, I played knight e8 here, and he goes rook b7. So yeah, he's just completely winning at this point. I just wanted to get rid of this nasty knight before he takes on f7. And then I guess I need to try something here like the check. The queen check and grab the pawn is my best plan here. But you see that white's completely winning anyway. I went knight b4 going for this little fork, but he can move the queen with tempo, counterattacking on f7. And there's no defense here. I played one more move. He took with the rook, setting up this horrible discovered check. And I ran out of time here, but in any case, I was completely lost. So nice game. Well played by Devin. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon.